And remember, for those people here who are parents, who are already advanced in age, it's never too late. So even if you are a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old or even more, setting yourself a target in life is something which can always and always happen. And don't shy away if you have entered into advanced age. The second suggestion that I'd like to give our younger generation here is, and I think that is, this suggestion is something which already is very much there in our society, but it just needs to be sharpened up. And that is, always follow the voice of your conscience. Our conscience, if it is vibrant and living, it never lies. So please do follow what your conscience says. And studying the Quran tells us in Surah Shams, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, that the awareness of good and evil is found innately in ourselves. We don't need to go to a mufti or a mullah or any person else to find out what right and wrong are. Basic right and wrong. So the awareness of right and wrong, the awareness of good and evil is found within a person as he or she is growing up. All you need to do is pay heed to that call. Whenever you do something and you find your inner self telling you that you're not doing something right, then pay heed to what the voice says. So follow your conscience. Your conscience seldom lies, and if you are able to follow your conscience, you'll find yourself to be an individual who actually is carving out a path, not only for himself or herself, but the legacy he or she is going to transfer to the next generation is also going to shine like a lighthouse. And if you have to have a strong conscience, there are some tips that I'd like to give to you. One of them is that, or I can actually subsume the tips into one broad category. If you have to have a strong conscience, then the way to have that strong conscience and to maintain that strong conscience is to have a very strong God connection. If you have a strong connection with God, you'll find yourself to be a person who is always looking after the calls of his or her conscience. And to have a strong connection with God, the foremost thing is to associate with Him in a manner as if you have that association with your mother, perhaps much more than that. But the amount of the vehement relationship, the emotional relationship that you have with your mothers and your father and your parents is a very small rudimentary example of that bigger relationship that you might have with the Almighty. All supports are temporary. It is God's support which is eternal. So you have to have that God connection, because there are so many things that you cannot share with other people. There are so many things which are your personal, and of course you don't need to even to share them with God. He already knows them. So a strong God connection. One thing that I would suggest is that always keep a good translation of the Quran at your bedside, and please do read it off and on. Make it a point to dedicate maybe 5 or 10 minutes every day. You can open up from anywhere and start reading, because the message of the Quran is so powerful, it's so potent, that if you have that connection, if you're able to establish that connection, it's going to work itself. And the second thing that I'd like to perhaps suggest is that try to memorize some surahs of the Quran. Of course, we have memorized some surahs of the Quran in our childhood, and that's how we pray. When we pray, we use those surahs that we have memorized. But then you see, the message of God is far more powerful than that. It's far more effective if you have the repertoire of surahs increasing day by day, because that would be something which lightens up your prayers as well. You see, those of us who pray, we know that after the prayer we suddenly realize, oh, what was I praying? We do all sorts of thinking within the prayer, but that is because we are generally not present while we are praying. So one of the things that will really help you is to memorize slowly, as far as you can, some parts of the Quran, which you should recite in the prayer. And of course, it goes without saying that looking after other people, doing charitable works, creatures of God, and people who have been created by God in misery, in a lot of stress, they should be the ones that should always call your attention to. And that is another way and means to achieve God's nearness. So it's not just by certain worship rituals, but by showing compassion to the society that you live in, caring about individuals who are lost souls. That is also something which is going to bring you really close to God. And if you have a God-oriented personality, you'll find out that it's easy for you to navigate among the vicissitudes of life. It's like a GPS. Or you just put it on and it'll just guide you through various paths, and hopefully you'll reach your destination. So first point that I had made was that you must set yourself a mission in life, if not already. The second is that you must have a very strong conscience, or maintain that conscience that you already have. And the way to do that is to have that strong God connection. I've just suggested a couple of ways. I mean, there could be many other ways, and there are in fact many other ways, like for example, connecting to other people of similar aspirations, people who go to the mosque, people who are righteous, people who are pious, because as individuals, we are affected by our company. So if you can make friends with people of similar sorts, that's going to help as well. So that strong God connection is going to guarantee a very good conscience. So that was point number 2. A third point that I'd like to suggest and raise here is that try to understand the religion that you are following in a very, very academic and a very logical way. Whenever a question comes to your mind, whenever some doubt comes to your mind, whenever you think that you are bothered by certain things, try to find out the reason or try to find out the background of that directive. Because you see, if you're following Islam or certain rituals of Islam, and your father or mother or maybe your teachers tell you to do so, at times you do so not because you understand why you're doing so, but because you've been told to do so. So it is here that you must break, and you must find out why is it that I'm required to pray 5 times a day? Why do I fast? Why do I go for Hajj? And why are some of the other acts that I do? So the why question is extremely important. For example, just to make my point more clear, we pray namaz or we pray the salah 5 times a day. Now this question could arise that why is it that we are required to pray so much? I mean, 1 time could be enough, a couple of times could be enough. Why is it that we are required to pray 5 times? So just to make this point, you see, when you connect with God, there are certain things that happen. And in order to understand those things, let us come down to the human plane. For example, if I am someone who is given a gift or a present by some of my friends or some of my cousins or any person I know, I feel obliged to him, isn't it? I feel that I should pay back the present or the gift that I have had. And in fact, what happens is that I end up giving that person a better gift when the occasion arises, because this is such a natural reaction of a show of kindness from someone else. We want to return that kindness, isn't that so? So you see, when we pray, we acknowledge the favors of the Almighty. We acknowledge Him as a creator. We acknowledge Him as a person, as a being who has looked after us, who has given our father and mothers to us, who has given us shelter, who has given eyes to see, who has given us so many things that we just cannot gauge. So just as we show this attitude of gratefulness and gratitude to people who gift us things, and our gratitude is instantaneous. It's like we are waiting for that gratitude, to return that gratitude. So imagine what God has done for us. So those 5 prayers are merely an acknowledgement of the fact that, oh Lord, you have done so much for us. I was just speaking another day to some other people, and I was saying that just look at the eyes that you have, and just close those eyes and try doing something with those closed eyes. Try to follow the routine that you do. Eat your food, change your clothes, go to the bathroom, and in a minute or so, you'll realize how difficult it is. So the eyes that you have, and there's so many things that I can count, and I will just narrate to you just one more thing. So I saw my aunt dying of cancer, and she actually had lung cancer. And slowly and surely, what happened was that the space in her lungs, which could encapsulate air, was decreasing. So she had to make an effort to take each breath. Imagine taking each breath voluntarily. We are breathing involuntarily. We don't even think when we are breathing. I saw her that as that cancer spread, even though that she had oxygen, but even that oxygen was not working. And every breath that she took, she had to voluntarily and intentionally take that breath. So imagine the agony, and imagine the breaths that we take without even realizing. So you see, the amount of gratitude that we owe to the Almighty is immense. So it is such things that if we keep on realizing, that we would understand that this prayer that we offer, 5 times a day, is merely an acknowledgement of the fact that God, thank you very much. Thank you for so much that you have done for us. And another thing that I'd like to point out here, which perhaps might not directly link to this topic, but just for the sake of exposition, I'd say that the amount of prayer that is actually required by God Almighty from us are the first rakat of the prayer. The 2 of Fajr, 4 of Zohar, 4 of Asr, 3 of Maghrib, and again 4 of Isha. That is the obligatory part of the prayer. As far as the other rakats are concerned, the nawafil, the sunnah, they are all optional. If you do them, you have the time, it's very good. But if you are not able to do them, just offer the first part. And then if you have to make a habit of praying, I often tell this to my students, to my people that I come across who have a difficulty in following a prayer routine, which has five prayers. I tell them to start off with one prayer. Become regular in one prayer. It's much easier. Start off with the easiest prayer, maybe the Asr or the Zohar or the Maghrib prayer, and then slowly add other prayers to your repertoire, and slowly and surely you'll find yourself that this is the process in which ultimately you enjoy praying. So if you start enjoy praying, if you start acknowledging the fact you're standing in front of the Creator, and also understand the fact that this is something which really, really takes yourself closer, you feel spiritually satisfied, you start enjoying the prayer, and that is the time when those nawafil and the sunnahs will automatically add themselves. You would not even have to make an effort for those things. So this is another thing that I'd like to make. So the third point that I'm making here is that understand your religion not on the basis of yes or no, not because your father or mother just said, okay, do that. Question everything. If you are being asked to pray, you must know why should I pray. Because once you know why you're praying, believe me, the impetus towards praying and your own natural inclination towards praying automatically increases. If you know that I'm going to thank God for so many things that I have every day, you would like to go there because it is such a natural thing that you do with human beings. Why would not you do it for God Almighty? So this is the third point that I'd like to make, that always understand religion on the basis of arguments, on the basis of reasoning, because that is what is going to make you a person who is going to follow religion out of his own or her own mind and logic. And also you'll be able to communicate this logic and this reasoning to people around you, to students around you. And in that way, you'll be spreading that legacy that you yourself earned through your own effort. And then, viewers, I would also, or participants, I would also like to tell this fact that as far as fasting is concerned, again, this is a question that arises in the minds of people that living a student life or a life in which we are made to go through certain routines, it does seem that why has God Almighty required us to fast for 30 days? Especially when we have exams, we have tough routines, we have workouts to do, and there are at times certain things that we cannot avoid. So in order to understand it, why should we fast, and why is it that fasting has been ordained as a ritual, do make note of the fact that we as human beings have two divisions, we have two clear divisions. We have a physical body or physical presence, and we have a spiritual body, of course, that's the soul. So just as you need nourishment for your physical body, you need food, you need water, you need other, you have to satisfy other needs. In a very similar way, you need to satisfy your spiritual self as well. Only last night I was discussing with someone that you go to the gym to keep yourself fit. That physical fitness requires a gym. So you need to go to another gym for that spiritual fitness as well. So it's like a spiritual gym. It's like a spiritual workout that you need, because just as if you don't do that physical workout, either you'll get a little fat and your tummy will bulge like mine, and if that doesn't happen, some other sickness might overtake you. So it's just as it is essential to be physically fit, it is essential to be spiritually fit as well. And this spiritual fitness, again, is something that we called earlier on as God connection. And one of the areas how God helps us in this spiritual fitness is that fasting, or that 30-day fasting period, tells us that this is one time in which the physical needs of your body should be neglected. So that spiritual self, which is sort of bogged down by the physical self in 11 months of the year, because you're eating and drinking and doing other things, that spiritual self doesn't get that chance to rise. So what happens is, in those 30 days, what you do is, you give that soul, your spirit, and your inner self, that spiritual self, that chance to rise and once again eat its fodder in a much more comprehensive way. So I can go on, and it's not my purpose to delineate each and every philosophy of every directive, but my submission to you would be that these, as Muslims, as born Muslims, I would say, take a step ahead and discover religion yourself. Discover that these aspects of religion yourself, and believe me, that will make you so close to God, and you'll feel so spiritually satisfied that it's hard to express in words. And finally, viewers, before we break up our just question answers, I'd like to stress one more thing, which is perhaps the fifth, if I correctly enumerate all these things, is that you have to play your role in the society that you live in. You just cannot think merely upon on your own self, about your own self. You have to think about others as well. This is something which is really going to make yourself before the Almighty. Selflessness is something which should come naturally to you. And remember, I always suggest that there are these steps towards selflessness which can really make you a person who can contribute to the society. And the first thing that I always suggest is that look at the redundant things that you have in your house. The pencils, the rubbers, although they are not no longer here, that they were in our times. But in modern times, you have so many things that you don't use in the house, so many clothes, you have so many brushes and pieces of furniture and crockery and shoes and bags, etc. They are in such a large number that you forget at times that you had them. And it's just a question of keeping your drawers and your cupboards clean always, and you'll find out that there is so much that you can give away. So the first thing that can help you is get rid of things that you don't use. And for that, make it a point to clean your cupboard, to clean your drawers every now and then, because you're bound to find things which you are not going to use, and hence you can give away. The second thing that you can do is that just look around the people that live in your house. And the biggest example of selflessness is the personality of the mother that you have. Our mothers are selflessness personified, isn't it? What they can do and what they do, I'm not belittling the father, and of course he has his role as well, but I think in most cases the sacrifices and the services performed by the mother is simply outnumbers everyone. So if you want to become selfless, look at your mother, look at the way she behaves. And if you go outside, I was just reading in the newspaper today that the Australian bushfires that have spread now, although they have had rain, but still they had fire once again. And 3 firefighters lost their lives because they were dumping some material to extinguish the fire, but they could not get out of that area, and their aircraft caught fire, and all 3 of them died. This was just yesterday. So I always fancy and I always marvel at these firefighters. I mean, they know that they could not have survived in certain situations, but they take the risk. I do remember certain stories of that 9/11 disaster in which firefighters and firemen went into that area, and knowing that they might never come out, just to take that risk that they might save one child maybe, or one person, they gave up their lives. You see, these real-time stories of selflessness, they abound. They are all around us. You don't have to be a special person or someone who's has a great background. No, these small instances are very near you. And if you have that nature walk that you often take when you were students and you were being taught, continue with that nature walk, and you'll find out the elements of nature. Look at the elements of nature. They are selfless in nature. I mean, the wind does not blow for itself. The sun does not shine for itself. The torrents that flow in the mountains, they give service to mankind. The trees which are there, they don't benefit their own selves. The shade that they give is for us. So I do see this element of selflessness in the elements of nature. They are doing things for us. And finally, I'm sure living in the United States or in Canada, you have this opportunity to donate your organs before you die. So make a will to donate your organs if you can, because this is a service that you can do for humanity. You can donate your eyes, you can donate your kidneys, you can donate your skin, which is used for skin grafting and many other uses. So this is again something which is going to be of immense benefit for you. It's what that Sadqa Jariya is all about. Imagine lighting up the eyes of a person who's blind. You just cannot grasp the happiness that he would feel when he starts seeing, and you are the person who supplied the eyes for that. So this was the fifth point that I wanted to make, that be attentive to the needs of the society that you live in. Always think that when you grow up, it's payback time, but don't wait for that payback time. We always think that when we are in our 40s or 50s, that this is the payback time. And I think that that payback time comes with your realization. Even a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old can do that payback thing as long as he or she realizes that his or her skills can be used to help out others. So with these few words, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to all of you, and God bless you all. And I will now request my host to please continue with the questions.
Hello. Hello everybody. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Aid Kamal. I'm 17 years old and I'm going to St. Francis Xavier Secondary School. Today I will be assisting as well as questioning Dr. Shehzad Saleem with any questions you guys have to ask. You guys can write them down on a piece of paper. There's clipboards that you can pass around, and then the questions will get to me and I'll read them for you guys. Thank you.
If you're not comfortable writing, you can actually stand up and ask a question also.
Sure. You talked about listening to your conscience, your inner voice. What do you do at a time when your inner voice or your conscience is conflicting values with religion or Islam in general?
Well, personally, my own experience is that there is no such contradiction which happens. It's either a misunderstanding regarding certain aspects of religion, because you see what God has said. He said, "فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا." I have given you this conscience and I have given you this awareness of good and evil. And religion itself is something which He has set down. So there cannot be, practically speaking, a contradiction between the voice of your conscience and religion. And also remember one thing, that the voice of our conscience is actually related to what right and wrong is. So as far as religion is concerned, it's not merely about right and wrong. We have various directives which are given by the Quran. So you have to make a distinction. Awareness of good and evil relates to moral good and evil. Religion itself is a much more detailed document in which you have a number of things that you do or you don't do. So I would make a distinction between the two as well.
You mentioned your point about the organ donation. Conventionally, what I've heard is that in Islam, usually like you want to bury the body as soon as possible. But when you go through the organ donation process, your body is I'm not sure exactly how long. I think it's like a matter of like 2 days or a few weeks in which like you're in the morgue and you're not buried. But do you think that's all right?
Yeah, you see the directive of hurrying up as soon as the person dies to bury him is of course there, but always with a good exception. If there is an exception, for example, if you have to wait for any of your close relatives, right? I mean, you could be in Pakistan or some other part of the country and you have relatives who would like to come and attend the burial, close relatives, then you can wait for those relatives. And very similarly, if that organ donation is going to take place, because that's for a bigger cause, then we can easily defer burying. So it's burying immediately is the case when you have no other, I mean, you're just keeping the body for without any reason. For any valid reason, the body can be kept as long as is required actually. Question that comes to your mind, don't lull it to sleep. I mean, all kinds of things happen, and we are always struggling. So one of the things that we at our institute try to do is that to engage ourselves in dialogue, in discussion, and in debate. You see, the general impression that we get regarding religion is that you should not question things, and this is something which is entirely contravenous to what the Quran says. Quran clearly says that you have to reflect on religion. It says that use your intellect. One of the verses of the Quran in Surah Al-Mulk says when people will go to hell, the persons who would be entering hell would say, "Law kunna nasma'u aw naqlibu ma kunna fi ashabis sayyid," which means, had we heard and used our intellect and sort of reflected on what we what we're asked to do, we would not have ended up in hell. So this I would say tradition in which we have silenced ourselves, especially regarding religion, is something that we have to do away with. And especially when you're living in a society in which you have your non-Muslim friends ask you all sorts of questions, your own teachers living around you. So you have to be responsive and responsible as well. So I would say that this is one of the areas that we need to work on. And I will always talk about the silent majority. So as a silent majority, you need to empower yourselves. And the best way to empower yourselves is to understand what religion is and enter into dialogue, enter into debate. Maybe you're not going to answer all the questions that might arise around you or in your own mind, but start that quest. You see, when you start that quest, when you enter that quest, it is something that's going to take you somewhere. So I think that this is one area that please do more than you're already doing.
So we got our first question on paper. Okay, so the question is, how do you know you have evil eye on you, and how do you avoid it?
Right. So this is something which is a psychosomatic phenomenon. I would say it's a psychological phenomenon. When people stare at people, when they stare at them longingly, we have this feeling as if something has happened. So first of all, you do understand that when you feel different, you feel some sickness in you, first of all go to a doctor, or maybe some self-medication can help as well, because many times there are some psychological happenings that are going on in your mind and your body, they're affecting them. Just to give you an example, when you praise someone, the other person starts to blush. Isn't that so? So that would mean that words have an effect on people. When you see something bad, you get enraged, you get red, you get angry. So that would again mean that physical things have psychological effects. So first of all, if you think there is something which you're not trying to, which is something which you're not trying to, you've not been able to cure, first see a very good physician or a doctor and have him ruled out all these things. And if the thing still does not go away, then what the Quran tells us that the last two surahs of the Quran, Surah Falaq and Surah Nas, they are surahs which bring you in the refuge of God from things that you cannot see, from evil that you cannot see. So I would say that it's difficult to detect whether you are under a spell or maybe you are under the evil eye or not. That we cannot say for certain. But what we can do is, first of all, go to a doctor and see him, and at the same time, keep reciting those last surahs of the Quran as much as possible, because these surahs give you the refuge of the Almighty. And one final thing that can also help is to, if it's slightly difficult, but if you can do it, that remain in the state of wuzu or of ablution as long as you can. Once your wuzu breaks, just don't do wuzu once the prayer comes, but do it immediately. So this is which keeps you physically and psychologically pure as well. So this is how I've done this.
Thank you for that.
Please go ahead.
What sense can we make out of the miracles which are mentioned in the Quran, and they seem to defy the laws of the nature and the laws of the universe around us? And what lesson we can derive from them which is relevant to us in present day and time?
Right. So you see, these miracles have generally been given to the prophets of God. You know that Jesus raised the dead to life, and he cured leprosy patients. Moses, of course, struck that staff in which the sea got divided. So these miracles basically, they defy physical laws. And remember, physical laws have been made by God. And if he can himself stop those physical laws from actually coming into play. And that does happen when, in order to communicate the truth to people who are arrogant, people who are self-righteous, prophets of God have been given the help of these miracles so that they can communicate the truth, and not only communicate the truth, actually pave the way for themselves so that the other person is going to listen. The Pharaoh was an arrogant person. He was in no mood to listen to Moses. It was only after Moses showed that miracle that he actually became attentive. So at times, just to pave the way for communication, these are given. At times, it is to caution and jolt and prod people that look what you're doing. Like, for example, Jesus was the last of the prophets of the Israelites. And after a sequence of so many prophets which came in 2,000 years, he was going to end his branch, which is the Bani Israel. And if the Prophet, the Almighty sort of course would have seen people that even if they don't wake up now, then there is a chance that they might end up in very bad circumstances later on in the hereafter. So in order to jolt and caution people, Jesus was given these miracles. I mean, look at a person who's dead and suddenly rises from being a dead person. So that's something which is meant to caution and prod people. So all of these miracles have their own background and their own philosophy. And remember, because God is the one who has created these physical laws, he can easily be the one who can change these physical laws for his own purpose. I'm sorry I forgot the second part of your question.
What is the message? What is the practical lesson we can derive from this message?
So the practical,
relevant to us in this time? Because
So
Quran is meant for guidance. What guidance we can take from this?
So the guidance that we can take is that the Almighty helps His messengers through various things which at times are out of the ordinary. When people who are in a situation who are dictatorial in their nature, these miracles help that person to actually stop and listen to a prophet of God. They don't bear any direct relevance to us. What they tell us is that even prophets of God need God's help, and at times God's help manifests itself through these miracles.
The only practical lesson we can derive from this is the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Exactly.
That is only
The might of God, and that might of God manifested itself for the prophets of God, and they used His might in order to show that there is a God, there is someone that you need to believe in, and if you don't believe in, then the person who is so almighty, he can really take you to task, and you're going to end up in trouble in the hereafter.
Thank you, Dr. Saab, for that response. I have the next question. The question is, there's a growing amount of Muslim youth who are disillusioned with Islam as a religious institute. In other words, they feel that it is taught to them as an extreme ideology. Do you have any advice for parents and or future parents when it comes to raising children in Islam?
You're absolutely right that parents and grown-up children, they have this concern that the way Islam is taught as an extremist ideology, although it might not be the case everywhere, this teaching, but at least the manifestation of this teaching is that you find people blowing up other people or people killing other people in the name of God. So I would say that one of the important lessons that we need to learn is, which I just mentioned earlier on, that try to understand religion on the basis of the wisdom of each directive. And you'll find out that there are so many directives in the Quran which have been interpreted out of context. And religion has been used to justify terrorism, to justify militancy. And if you just study how these verses are in context, as I said very earlier on, just keep a good translation of the Quran handy. And whenever you find something which is not understandable, you can of course consult a scholar. But believe me, by merely reading those verses in context, the way they have been presented, you'll find out that people who are using these verses at their own advantage are doing something which is wrong, which is not right, it's against the principles of interpretation. So my advice to all people who think that religion is being used for their disadvantage is that go deeper. And it's just a question, out of experience that I've taught religion, I can tell you it's just a question of a year in which the average time that you give is maybe 30 minutes every day with 5 days a week. You can go through the basics of religion in a manner that you're able to understand those precepts and the questions which arise and the way they have arisen in current times will get answered. And of course, you always have the service of people who are willing to answer those questions. But you see, you have to make that effort. What I see when I travel the world amongst people is the amount of effort that we need to do falls well short. I mean, we could be attending sessions like these, but once we go back, we once again get ourselves involved in so many other things. It's a question of giving some importance, some priority to religion and make it a point that you have to actually make it available for you through this effort. So let us not fall short of the things that we can do.
Thank you, Doctor, for the answer. The next question is, within the prayer, what is the most obligatory part? Also, any suggestions to make our prayer more alive and engaging?
Right.
Can we, wait.
Okay.
Sorry, hold on. Okay. Can we talk to God in our words during namaz, and at which point can we do that?
So the second part of this question, or the series of questions, is that how can we make our prayer more enlivened and more connective towards God. So I would say that one of the things that can help, I already mentioned that please do learn the Quran more so that you can recite more within the prayer. And of course, the thing that goes without saying is that you must know the meaning of the prayer that you're offering. So more often than not, when you're offering the prayer, like for example, Surah Fatiha or Sana or what you say in Yattahiyya, you just have learned it by heart without actually knowing what those words mean. So if you are able to gauge the meaning of the things that you say in prayer, that is one way in making your prayer much more fruitful, and you will remain attentive as well. And the last part of the prayer, just before you say salam, is the part in which you can even pray in your own language. In your own language, whether it's Urdu or English, the last part of the prayer, in which just before saying salam, you say Rabbi Jalani or some of the other du'as. You can say other du'as as well, and you can say du'as in your own language as well. And I think the first question was that, which is the most important part. I think it's difficult to say which is the most important part. All parts have their own importance, all parts have their own significance, because not only the utterances, but the postures as well. When you stand before God, when you kneel before Him, and for example, when you prostrate before Him, all these postures, they have their own significance. They show your own humility before the Almighty. And similarly, when you utter various things like Surah Fatiha itself, it's the biggest dua that you can say. Just reflect on the meanings of Surah Fatiha, and you'll find out that they are so overwhelming that you would like to keep on reciting them. So that is one of the obligatory parts. And let me also tell you this, that this Surah Fatiha is also found in a different way in the Bible, in the Old and the New Testaments. So because of the fact that the previous prophets also prayed, we know that they prayed 5 times a day the way we pray. The prayer was not started with Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Abraham started to pray. And when they were praying, the things that they would pray would be from the previous scriptures. So if I have time, I can show you that the Psalms of David, the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew, and the Old Testament, the Book of Deuteronomy, they all have their Surah Fatihas in them, something similar to Surah Fatiha, which they used to read in their prayers. So such a universal phenomenon is this praying, that all the prophets of God had prayed in exactly these 5 times. And as I said, that this is something that you need to go deeper and deeper, and you'll find out so many other things that we think we don't know at the moment. And the foremost among them is that we think that the prayer was something which was started by the Prophet himself. No, it was not. If you just study the Quran, you'll find out Jesus telling his followers to pray. You'll find out Moses telling his followers to pray. Abraham telling his followers to pray. Exactly in the same words. So prayer is a very old custom. It's a very old tradition. It's a very old ritual. And as such, we have to gauge its importance as well.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. The next question is, what makes seafood permissible to eat?
What makes?
Seafood permissible.
Seafood, as long as you're eating seafood which is not carnivorous, the animal that you're eating is not a savage animal, it not pounces on the prey and does not have those savage tendencies, like for example, land animals like lion have. For example, something very analogical to this would be sharks and other sea animals, which actually pounce on their prey, they kill on their prey, and have those savage tendencies of beasts. So beasts have been forbidden to us in reality. So we don't eat lions or tigers normally, unless of course there's something wrong in our nature. Similarly, seafood is all types of seafood in which the animal is such that it bounces on the prey, it eats the meat of the prey in a way that it snatches the meat from the other prey. So those are the animals, whichever they are. Of course, there's a huge repertoire of those animals, but I give a very, very blatant example. The shark is one of them. Some other fish are also very, very close to them. So that would be the area in which you have to exercise caution and not consume them. Although I know shark meat is a delicacy.
Thank you. The next question is, there's a visible generation gap between youth and parents. How do you come to common grounds and keep healthy relationships?
Well, if I answer as a parent, I think there are people here who might criticize me. I'm a parent, but I think we must take responsibility. One of the reasons that we have this communication gap is the attitude of the parents themselves. They don't realize that once their children start growing up, they have a personality of their own. They have thoughts of their own. They have things which they would like to do themselves. And what we parents do, we bog them down, we block them, we put all sorts of restrictions on them. It's not that we should not do that, but we should do that in a manner once the child is grown up, then the final decision rests with that child. I mean, as soon as he or she enters a certain age in which he or she has a certain decision that she can make or he can make, that is the time when parents should withdraw. The force that they can use should be at the time when the child is growing up, maybe 4 or 5 years of age, when he or she does not realize that force. I mean, he would just succumb to the force and not mind that. So as soon as children start accepting or start having that vision that they are individuals themselves, it is here that parents must realize that they are individuals. We have to give them the best education, of course, that goes without saying, but we must not impose our religious, cultural, and social view on them. Let them have their own say. Let them produce it themselves. And if we start doing that ourselves, I was just speaking to another gathering a couple of days ago, and I actually would like to repeat those words which I said. And I said that if you force your children to do what you would like to do, it's a gross violation of human rights. It's a violation of human rights because you see, look at the scheme of the Almighty. The Almighty has made you free individuals after a certain age. And imagine yourself being bogged down or being restricted to certain activities if you were in that age. So what happens is that we become much more ambitious and we would like our children to become very, very righteous and pious even at the age of 12 or 14, forgetting the fact that we ourselves took a long time coming back to guidance. So I think one of the areas which parents really, really need to work on is they must not impose themselves. And these impositions especially relate to spouse selection, to career selection, to a number of other things. An adult child should be given the free decision to make whatever he would like to do or she would like to do in selecting a spouse, in selecting a career, and in taking all important decisions. As parents, you can of course suggest, you can advise them, you can tell them that you're taking a wrong step, my dear, but that's all. Try yourself to become a suggestive person when your child grows up. And let him or her make mistakes. Why is it that we become so ambitious? We made all kinds of mistakes when we were growing up, because it is through these mistakes that they're going to learn as well. And it's difficult to restrain yourself as parents because we don't have patience. We would not like our children to be to go out of the way or to go astray in front of our own selves. But then this is how this world is, how God has created us. He has not made us angels. He has made us as human beings. Human beings are people who can make mistakes. And I always say this, that it's not the sin which counts as much as your attitude after the sin. And the second thing is, let us never hate the sinner, let's hate the sin. So if a person is making a mistake, it is the mistake that is something wrong. Why condemn the person? Because that person is someone who needs to be attended to, who needs to be given more time to, who needs to be given more attention to. And I always quote this thing from the Bible, from the prophet Jesus, when he said in the Gospel of, in the Sermon of the Mount, the famous Sermon of the Mount, and when people said that, look, you're sitting with sinners, you're sitting with people who are bad people, they're evil people. Why is it, Master, that you're sitting with these people? And look what he said. He said, I have not been sent to the righteous, I have been sent to the sinners. Look what the prophet of God is saying. So remember that these mistakes and these things, they do cost a lot. But then let them make these mistakes. And the other thing that I would like to tell you is, as a parent myself, that is not spy and pry on the privacy of our children. Looking at their cell phones, seeing whether they are here or there, where are they, why are they coming or not coming, what is the time. This is not going to work. This is not going to make problems or things easier. Have trust in them. Make them feel confident individuals. If you keep on spying and prying and watching their phones and tracking their abilities and putting a GPS behind them, it's just sticking. I've seen parents sticking something behind the back of their child so that they can track their child on the computer. I mean, this is not the right thing. This is not the right way at all. You have to make them realize that they are individuals. If they are individuals who have inclination towards the truth and towards righteousness, then one day they'll realize that. So don't be fastidious in this matter. And I can go on some other suggestions as well, but I might as well stop here because I can see certain parents not very, very happy.
Thank you. The next question is, can you shed some light on The Jaw and why did they tell us not to watch the movie The Messiah on Netflix? The Messiah.
I don't know why. I would encourage everyone to see why not. I mean, you should see whatever is going on. as far as things which relate to other religions are concerned, the only thing is that you have to safeguard against maybe vulgarity or things which are immoral in nature. Other than that, if it is history which is being related, you should encourage your child to do that. When my child was growing up, I gave him a children's Bible when he was in grade 7. And I said that you should study other religions as well, and unless you do so, how would you realize, how would you compare with them, how would you fare in life? So I don't know what the reason is.
Part two of this question. Huh? There's part two.
Okay, sorry.
Part two is why do other religions believe he's good or the next Messiah?
Why do other religions believe that?
He's good.
Who's good?
I think the jaw of the
Well, I'm not aware of the movie for myself, so I don't think that I'll be, unless someone stands up and explains a little more, what exactly is the question. It's okay. Maybe you can write down again and send some explanation of what the question is. Because frankly, I couldn't understand the question.
Should we move on to the next question?
Okay.
It says, can you talk about marriage, love marriages? Are they allowed in Islam, and to what extent are parents allowed to disagree?
Absolutely allowed. You see, love is something which is so natural that unless you have that love, how can you not marry someone? I mean, it's virtually something which is a given at times. So you see, you can fall in love. Falling in love is something which is not at all prohibited. The only thing is that once you fall in love with someone, you should follow a certain decorum. Marriages can be arranged and they can be love marriages. There is not a problem at all in this, and I think that we need to take stock of our behavior, because we think that perhaps if a boy or girl has fallen in love, this is something against the Sharia, this is something against religion. It certainly is not. To love someone is such a natural emotion that arises in us. It actually strengthens the bond between humanity. It is the basis of coming closer to each other and becoming faithful partners to each other. So it's a very, very strong force, and it should be actually given significance and importance. The only thing is that once this feeling arises in between a girl and a boy, then they should follow a certain decorum, maybe disclose this to their parents. And let me tell you, many years ago, this dating started off in France in the 18th century, and it was called the chaperon dating, in which adults trying to find the match of their children, they would meet prospective parents of other families in the presence of their children, and this would be called chaperone dating, in which the parent, what I'm trying to say is that this element of dating started off as a means to find out a good match for your children, and it actually started off with parents. It was not that the children dated another child or a girl dated a boy. It was the family who would provide this opportunity so that they could come each other and know each other. This is how it started in 17th century France, and then it developed to what we have today. But as I said, if you have those feelings developed for someone, they are but natural. Don't feel guilty about them. It's human nature to have those feelings of love and affection for the opposite gender. The only thing is that after those feelings arise, you have to follow a certain decorum, which I'm sure you know.
Thank you, Dr. Saad. I have to announce that there are books at the back side of the hall, and please buy at your own discretion.
Well, it depends. If you have, if you give importance to your religion tells us that there are certain rules that you follow in marrying, in cross-religious marriage, in inter-religious marriages, and there are certain rules which they should also follow. But of course, that is only the case when you have that importance and when you are studying religion and when religion matters to you. But if that is not the case, and for example, inter-religious marriage take place against the principles outlined in the Quran, I can say nothing. All I can say is that there were so many things happening against Islam when the child was growing up, maybe, or something, some sort of a thing. He was not praying or she was not praying or in the Quran, and suddenly when he starts to get married, the whole principle of Islam comes in. Why is that? I mean, either you have it as a package so that the whole background is with that person, and if that is not the case, then just don't interfere with the lives of your children. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. The next question is, an argument a parent gives to justify their pushiness on religion is that God will hold them accountable for the child's sin. Is that true?
That is absolutely wrong. There is not a single verse in the Quran or any hadith which says that a parent is going to be responsible for his children. No. If that was the case, look what happened to Noah's son. I mean, he was drowned because of his own attitude. Noah was not responsible for his son. And similar is the case with all other things. Once you become an adult, once you become a person who is accountable before God, no one else is going to take that responsibility. You are the person who is going to be responsible. So parents should they better get rid of this notion that they are responsible for their children. They are not. Once a child grows up, as I said repeatedly earlier on, he is responsible, she is responsible for the decisions, and he or she is responsible before God as well. And that is precisely why I say that parents should back away. They should give that breathing space to their children. They should let them, understand that they are human beings who can take their own decisions, own up to their own decisions, take wrong decisions, later on correct them. This is how God has created us. If we do something else, we are interfering in the scheme of God, which I just said is a violation of human rights.
Yeah, but being a parent, do you think shouldn't we convey the God's true message to our kids?
Well, that goes without saying. When I say that our responsibility as a parent, of course, is that the things that we need him or her to know, basic morality, the religion that we follow, that all goes without saying. When he or she is growing up, when he or she is maybe 6 years old, 8 years old, all the way to maturity, that is the time that you should instruct him or her. But once that time passes, I am talking about the time when it's passed. So children and parents have all the liberty to talk to each other, to have this discussion with each other. But I am talking about the final decision. What I see is that parents take a lot of decisions on behalf of their children. They're grown-up children, and they don't allow them to take a decision for themselves. So it is here that we need to realize that the scheme of God is not in accordance with what we are doing. We need to give them the liberty to take a decision for themselves. And also, I would like to add this, that if we don't do this, it's going to happen anyway. And it's happening anyway, isn't it? So better realize it before it happens.
This is some cases, for example, one of the parent is the Sunni, another is the Shia, and then when the children born and they grow, the father is doing something else, and the mother is doing something else, and then they're confused and they kind of decide. And so same is like over here,
Interfaith, right.
So actually the children they confuse, they suffer, and then the parents they are also like very upset what to do now, and there is a conflict between opinions and other is the and the side. So
Right.
how do you
So you see, this is here that parents should play their part. They should tell their children, well, you're doing something which might end up in a fiasco. You might not succeed. If the two parents have different ideologies, it might clash. You can do all sorts of advice. You can tell them all sorts of suggestions. But what if he or she still sticks to what the decision he or she has taken? It is here that I say that parents are not allowed to force their children. You see, as far as advising them is concerned, as far as telling them that as your seniors, we can, out of experience, we can tell you that you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. You can tell all these things in a very friendly manner. But can you stop them forcibly? No, you cannot. Do your role and then leave that person to decide.
in the back home,
I know. This happens in life. If a person is bent upon doing something, you cannot forcibly stop that person. That's what God tells us. Decision has to be from the person who is responsible for that decision. And if he or she takes it, you never know it works as well. You have those instances which you have given in which the marriage fails. But there are other instances in which out of all odds, breaking all odds, the marriage succeeds. So we are not God. At times we behave as God. At times we think that we know everything, that's going to happen in the future. You should not do this, you should not do that. For God's sake, we don't know the future. All we can do is suggest. And I think if we keep suggesting, we might be able to convince our child. You see, in the first place, that child would have been easily convinced if we had adopted a logical behavior. But because we are mostly illogical and convincing, something which could have been easily stopped through some reasoning, you don't even give that chance to arise.
Actually, I noticed like this kind of behavior where this like, oh, we do not follow the religion. And this is
So, as you see, if people are already not bothered about religion, then why do we, burden them with this, that they should consider religion by making a decision? See, it's a matter of priorities, and priorities in life are set up very earlier on. So, unless a person has that priority, what else that we can do except maybe make him realize that? Our task is just to suggest, to educate people, to do best what we can by telling them. And that's all. We have to withdraw after that. We must back away after that and realize that it's the other person's decision. After all, he is marrying. It's not that we are marrying that girl or boy.
I have to announce, only reading questions, please, because some people are not unable to hear the questions that are being asked. So, sorry for the inconvenience. And also, I have to announce that participants to please donate generously, please and thank you. The next question is, how do we address the question, what our belief in a religion such as Islam has in all or part been conjured by people due to past things such as folklore, what's been passed from generation to generation, and only because we've been born into that belief system? What is the sole purpose for believing in our religion and having a concept of God?
So I think that's a very good question to discuss, and that is that we have to learn religion from authentic sources. And for that, we might need to unlearn a lot of concepts, which include folklore, which include cultural things which are added to our religion and they become part of it, historical things that become part of it. So just as we go to a very good teacher of physics or chemistry or accountancy, to have a very fair and good knowledge of that subject, unfortunately, that's not our attitude in the case of religion. So we need to revise that attitude. And we need to go to people who have a sound knowledge of religion as far as possible and make ourselves acquainted with religion. So as I just said earlier on, it's just a question of taking pains. And you would realize that the religion that we are taught today, and I can see in the North American continent, I've seen so many syllabi, so many courses, so many teachers, a lot of things that they are teaching us, our children, either are related to the culture of Arab culture, at times it's the subcontinent culture, at times it is merely something which they've heard from their elders without any verification. And there are so many things which have absolutely no basis and they are hearsay. And you find out that a person is vehemently talking as if he's an authority. He says Islam says this, Islam says this. And if you just stop him and say, where does Islam say this? And he says, okay, I've heard it from such and such a person. And then the chain goes on and on. And it's like something which he has heard from someone, she has heard from someone, and it's like a whole series of hearsay. So I think the thing that we need to do here today in the North American continent here is that learn religion from its authentic sources, from its original sources. Don't settle for something less. We go to the best doctor when we are sick, don't we? So go to the best person in religion that might be around you. And because of the presence of social media, that person need not be in your own locality or your own country even. We have people around the globe who can really make you feel very confident about religion, who can really educate you on your religion. There are so many good universities, there are so many good professors who offer very good courses. So as I said earlier on, it boils down to the same thing. Give time. Set your priorities in a manner that you're able to learn religion, because this is something which you need in any case, something which you cannot go without. And unless you give that time, that importance, because questions will keep on arising in your minds, and people will keep on actually fooling you that this is Islam and this is not Islam, and you would not realize that you've done something actually without even knowing that whether it's Islam or not. So it's just a question of empowering yourself. You can only empower yourself through education. Thank
you. The next question is, why are children sadaqah jazia for parents, and is there anything in the Quran?
You see, the Quran does not directly mention this, but it does mention the fact that children are people who are the products of their own parents, and hence anything that they do is going to indirectly benefit their parents. And for this, we do find verses in the Quran, and the Prophet himself has very very vehemently and very clearly, unequivocally said that the Sadqa Jariyah is something which, of course, is what the reward they will get even when they die. You see, if they made us good individuals, as good human beings, as good Muslims, as good practicing human beings, whatever good we do is going to ultimately indirectly help them as well. Because your own children are people with whom you have spent time with, you have groomed them. That grooming has made that person more contributing, more compassionate, more caring to the society that he lives in. And because of the fact that the parent had a role in that instruction and education of that child, so every good deed which the child is going to do is going to accrue in the account of the parents as well, indirectly.
I'm sorry, I'll just say something directly, because this question and the previous one were kind of interrelated.
Okay.
When you said that the child's actions will not be used as a sin against the parents, and then over here the rewards will go to the parents.
Right.
There's a bit of contradiction over there. If you could just elaborate on
So,
that, because the two questions
right.
are kind
So,
of
for
related.
example, if a child has been neglected and he or she should have been a person or someone who should have received instruction in time for the parents, and he gets involved in bad habits or bad things because of that neglect from the parents, then that is something which will, of course, have that effect. But again, it has to be out of his own free will. You cannot stop your child from doing that. If the child is doing automatically those bad things, and you have a very strong role in those bad things, so what you need to do is correct yourself instead of correcting your child.
Doctor, that ayah,
Right.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم
Right.
وأهليكم نارا.
Mhm.
How do you?
It means that you have to be careful with them. You have to let them know that you are a person who is going to tell them that they're doing something wrong. Please don't do something wrong. It does not mean that you have to forcibly stop them. Ku anfusakum means try to save them from the fire. And when you do so, it's like being emotionally attached to them. It's like at times begging them, at times pledging with them. There's so many things that you can do without using force, educating them. So the verse Ku anfusakum wa ahlikum nara actually relates to all those instances that you can adopt in making them more righteous without using force. Why is it that we think that this verse actually includes force? And let me tell you, I think it's something of an experience that you must have all gone through. The more you use force, the more counterproductive it is, isn't that? If you force me to do something, I might do it out of my respect to you, but once you go away, I'll be the first person to stop doing that. So it's against common sense. The Prophet never did this. His companions never did this. The Quran never asked us to do this, and it is against human psyche as well. That when you force a person to do something without letting him know or her know the reason, it's not going to work. It's just going to appease your ego. That's all it's going to do.
And where does that, I mean, even without force, right? It doesn't stop at any point. The child can be 50 years old, 60 years old.
So you see, that is the wisdom that we have to learn. That we must not be repetitive. We must wait for the right time. We must not always be scolding a person. We must, even if he's a child who's a 50-year-old and the father and the mother are there, it's like exercising your own wisdom, your own prudence. That just as you are not always doing all the things all the time, you wait for the opportune moment. You wait for when the iron is hot to strike, so to speak. So it's like exercising that prudence, that wisdom, and that is the key in which you can actually do all those actions. So that is something which the Quran also says, that the key to this wisdom is patience. If you want to be a wise person, not only in various other affairs, but also in instructing other people, then the biggest key to wisdom is patience. Because patience is something which makes you stop and reflect and think that maybe you're doing something in a hurry. Maybe you're just responding immediately and reacting immediately. And that is counterproductive to any wise thoughts or any wise suggestion that you can give. So wisdom is the answer to that, and the key to wisdom is patience. And patience is something which comes with patience.
Thank you.
So, Doctor, you about the question of generation gap, how to address the generation gap, you gave some good advice to the parents. What would you advise to the youth also,
Right.
which is mature enough to understand that
So-
how they should behave to their parents to break
Right.
that generation?
So that's a very good question to balance the situation. But having said that, I think one of the things that we can do as growing up children, if I imagine myself in their shoes, would be that I have a situation at hand, and that situation is that I have parents who are very, very dictatorial, parents who are individuals who would like to force their opinion, and also I have parents who would like to share a lot of their experiences. So my take on this would be that I would think that people who are much more experienced than me in life, people who have spent a lot of their time in the things that we are now doing, so I should be very, very careful in rejecting their advice, because they are more experienced, and this is common sense, and it goes with everything. A person who is older to you and who has been in the same ship that you are in is bound to have more experience. So as a wise person, as a person who would like to be go along in life in a very good manner, I would weigh their suggestions very, very strongly, and would have a very strong reason. I would not summarily dismiss them, not just dismiss them because I don't like them. I would try to analyze them. I would like to see. And the second thing I would like to do is to engage my parents into conversation. I would tell them that, look here, mother, look here, father, if there's something that I'm not following your advice upon, it's because of these reasons. I think this is how things work. So if you engage your parents and do that in a very respectful way, so what happens is that teenagers and youngsters, they become rude to their parents. So this is one area that they need to work on. Rudeness is something that is not going to communicate. Just as anger is not going to communicate anything from the parents, similarly, if a child is rude towards his parents or her parents, he's not going to help the cause. So these three would be my suggestions: that don't be rude, always be respectful, engage them in conversation, and always count them that they are much more experienced than you, and as a person who is entering life, they have seen a lot and you have not seen as much. So if they are giving some advice, I must have a mighty good reason to reject that advice.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question is,
You want to ask? Please.
I want to come back to the same question actually. The thing that you pointed out, it's really, because it's not resolved yet, I would
Okay.
say. A
Generally, it is
person-
not in the mind of parents.
A person who has brought up his children,
Mhm.
he should be rewarded only for how he brought up the children. Whatever the children are doing, the reward of those deeds should not be transferred to the parents. I don't understand the logic of doing the umrahs and hajj on behalf of the parents.
So that is another
because
thing.
the Quran says, "La
Okay.
taziru waziratun
Wizra
wizra
ukhra."
ukhra."
Right.
So even if a person has neglected his children, only on him will be the burden of the neglect, not the deeds.
That's
of
what I'm
the-
saying. But that's what I've precisely said, that neglect, and if that neglect caused something very grave. For example, God forbid your child murdered someone, did something very bad, and that neglect had a very strong role, then there could be that there's something of that punishment that he has to face as well. But you're absolutely right, that it's primarily that neglect for which that person is liable for, or for which the parent is liable for. But there are times in which if that neglect goes much far, it goes beyond certain limits, then he could be charged with something beyond that neglect as well. But always remember one thing, that God is just. So sitting here, we are trying to make sense of justice, of God's justice. So if he's going to punish someone or maybe accept some excuse from that person, he knows everything what is right. So we trust that justice would be taking place. Now what we are doing is trying to just rationalize that justice. So that's the best that we can do. But ultimately we know that justice is going to take place, and if a person had done something wrong in his life and that wrong contributed into further wrongs later on in his own generations, and for example in other aspects of the society or other sections of the society, then there could be this situation when God holds that person responsible for that as well.
Yeah, because the concept of sadaqah jariyah actually contradicts the ayah of la taziru waziratun wizra.
No, you see, la taziru waziratun wizra ukhra, it says that no person will bear the burden of sin of a person. It says the burden of sin.
Burden of sin.
It's not the burden of good.
So that
which
could be
is being
taken,
said.
and it
So
works
as I
for
said,
that
if
one.
you see, you have to understand the fact that a person will be rewarded. The Quran says, "Laisa lil insani illa ma sa'a." He shall be rewarded in the hereafter for what he did. So if I prepared my children, I was able to instruct them in a good way. So that's going to be just very similar to a hospital that I made, and which was responsible for curing a lot of people. So just as a hospital was something which I made for the benefit of people after me, in a very similar way, I also was able to prepare and educate a human being, being my son or daughter, who was in herself or himself very beneficial for mankind in some way or the other. So the example is exactly the same.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. The next question that I have to ask you is, it says, as we live in a Western society, interest and credit are normal ways of financing purchases.
Right.
What does Islam say about these concepts and how do we operate in our society as Muslims?
So if you're talking about, for example, mortgage or a thing that you buy on credit or leasing on credit, especially cars and assets, which include houses, then this is something which absolutely allowed in the Quran and Hadith as well. Because here what you're doing is you're not borrowing money, you are actually buying an asset against that money. So when you buy an asset, that asset is not a consumable asset. That is something which stays. It might depreciate. You can give it back all the time. So interest is always on money. When you take interest or you take a loan against an asset, that is never counted against as something which is of interest. So today, living in this society, if you have to borrow money on mortgage for maybe your house or car or any other gadget, as long as it is a gadget or an asset, it does not come under the label of interest. It only comes under the label of interest when you borrow money. That is something which is consumable. And here again, I'd also like to add one thing, that in the Quran, if you study the Quran, you'll find there are 4 verses which deal with interest. And there is not a single verse in the Quran which prohibits giving of interest. All 4 verses of the Quran say that you must not charge interest. I must not consume interest. So if I take a loan from a bank on interest, what I'm doing is I'm paying back over and above. In fact, I am being oppressed for that. So we have to realize the second element as well, that giving interest has never ever been forbidden in the Quran. All those 4 verses speak of charging of interest. For example, a bank might be doing something wrong, but it charges an interest, or a person. But if I have to borrow money on interest, and I'm paying that money back as well as some additional amount, it's in no way something which has been prohibited by the Quran anyway, in any place. This is a misconception that has long been found in our Muslims, and I think they need to revise and revisit this view.
So does that mean that you can borrow money from the bank for the sake of doing the business as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you see, what you're doing is you're paying back interest, and that interest is over and above the loan that you have got. And that is actually something in which you are being oppressed. What to speak of oppressing others? It's like being oppressed yourself. So, and as I said, you go back to your house and Google all those 4 Quranic verses which have interest, and everywhere the words are الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَا, أَكْلُ الرِّبَا, which means consuming interest. There is not a single verse which says that paying interest is also prohibited.
There is actually an ayah, and I think it's Surah Ankabut or somewhere, وَمَا آتِيتُمُ الرِّبَا
So you see, that is again in regarding paying of interest. It's on charging of interest. It does not say paying of interest. If you read it again, it says the loan that you give so that it sort of nurtures itself in the wealth of other people is not going to benefit you. Again, the question is giving of the loan on interest. It's not charging. It's not paying of interest actually. It's charging of interest. It's just a thing that you might revisit. Please do read all those 4 verses, and I think they're pretty clear that it's always the charging of interest which has been prohibited and never the paying of interest.
If that's the argument, then interest is a transaction between 2 parties. One is charging, one is paying.
Right.
So you're saying one side is haram, but the other side is
So this is what the Quran has said. You see, the Quran was revealed in the society when interest was rampant. There were caravans would go, and things would come and as merchandise, and they would be sold on interest. It was not just personal interest, not just individual loans. We had commercial loans in those times. So what happened was that in those 20 years when the Prophet was alive, unless the interest was forbidden in the 10th Hijrah, in the last sermon, when the Prophet said, now it stands as outlawed, I am talking about that time. As long as interest transactions prevail in a society, as long as they do, it is here that the paying of interest is not prohibited. However, once interest has been totally outlawed, banks are finished and everything goes away, it is here that we have to actually be careful, and it is here that the charging as well as paying would both be disallowed. So we are talking about the society in which the Quran came, in which interest was still rampant.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad.
Can I just, I mean, it's not specifically interest related, but here's where the thing comes out.
Do make note of this, that basically it is a youth
Yes,
program.
and that is
so, I mean, we can of course go on with the question that you have.
I am going to ask from a youth perspective. It's,
Okay.
the perspective is that when you, a little while ago, spoke about when youth are wanting to go towards religion, they should go to different sources of Islam.
Right.
The
Mhm.
Quran, and the Hadith, and then of course there are the scholars. My question is that when it comes to interpreting these sources,
Mhm.
okay, even scholars differ.
Right.
What you, this subject of interest is a prime example right now.
Right.
Because there are lots of scholars we've heard who will not agree with what you just said.
Right.
So how would you advise the youth
Mhm.
on selecting the correct source?
I
Because
think
I mean,
that's
we
a
don't
very
want to
good
go into the
question.
details of the
Uh-huh.
hadith and the things, but even
Right.
when you're going to
Mhm.
scholars.
So my advice, as I said that when I said earlier on that you must learn religion from its sources and learn its the reasoning behind each directive. So at times it does happen that the same directive is interpreted differently by a couple of scholars. So in that case, you need to study the contesting opinions. For example, in a particular divorce scenario, you would have a particular scholar say that this is how it should take place, and another one saying this is how it should take place. So you have conflicting opinions in a single matter. So in that particular case, what you should do is study both opinions and think, and then accept the one which is the most convincing for you, for your intellect. And if you think that you need to be a scholar to be in a position to interpret between two scholars, this is not correct. To give you an example, when you go to a doctor, you're not a doctor, you go to a couple of doctors to find out who is a better doctor. I am not a doctor. When I go to a doctor and speak to 2 or 3 of them, I immediately, come to sort of a conclusion that this is a better person. He's talking sense. His prognosis is much better. So in a very similar way, when you speak of or you understand 2 contesting opinions, all you need to do is study them and evaluate their reasoning. And once you do them, once you do that, you'll find out it's very easy to find out which is more convincing to you.
So it is fair to say that not listening to a scholar is not something wrong. I mean, you can have multiple scholars.
Absolutely.
But the youth should use their own
Discussion.
logic and
Their own
reasoning.
discussion. You have different opinions on various subjects.
Yes.
And this exists not only in religion, in science also, in social sciences as well. You find the same theory, economics, you find in science, for example, people interpreting the universe in different ways. And what you do is, you try to understand those views and then goes what convinces you the most. So the methodology is exactly the same as you adopt vis-a-vis other sciences or other disciplines of knowledge.
Next question here is, it's been said that the divorce rate within the Muslim community has risen to 51%. How do we explain this? Is it the lack of understanding of the true values and principles as guided by our Quran? Yeah.
Well, in one word, I think husbands should behave themselves. Well, let me elaborate this. Actually, what has happened is that one of the reasons in which this divorce rate has risen is because over the last maybe 3 decades or so, women are getting empowered. And formerly, they used to put up with the bad habits of their husbands because they had no place to go. And that is why the divorce rate was very low. It was like a forced stop that was put on the marriage because typically a lady would say, well, I have children, well, I have no place to go, and my father said that only your janazah should come back from your house, etc., etc. So this was the attitude and approach which our previous ancestors, if I'm allowed to say, they had. But now, as women are becoming more and more professional, they are understanding things much better. It is here that they now know that they need not stick with the same person if he's not, changing himself or herself. So one of the reasons is that the way men, I am a husband, I take full responsibility. I'm not a very good husband. Whatever I'm saying, I'm a very good example of that as well. So I think that as husbands, we have, taken certain things for granted. And one of the things is, which I just said earlier on, that we force our opinion on our spouses. We overpower them, we overwhelm them, we don't give them space. There are a lot of things that as heads of the family, we must accommodate. Because this was not happening much in the past, what was happening was that women were being oppressed, specifically wives, and they were being forced to be pulled along because they had no other option. But today, because they have options, they opt out of that marriage bond instead of just being dragged in it. And it is here because I just said earlier on that men need to rectify themselves, because more often than not, I have been a marriage counselor for a better part of 2 decades, and I can see that one of the reasons for marriage breakups, or a very strong reason for marriage breakup, is the wrong attitude. Generally, I'm saying, of course, there are always exceptions, but generally it is the husband who is to blame. And he, in his own capacity, I'm talking about desi parents, I'm not talking about people who are born here, because see, the mechanics are different here. But people who are educated in the subcontinent, because they have seen their own parents exercise the same hegemony, I call it male hegemony, on their mother or maybe the spouse of their father. This is how they behave themselves as well. And they don't realize that this is something which they have, just as we are not authorized to force ourselves on our children when they are grown up, in a very similar way, we are not authorized to force ourselves on our wives, come what may. They have this full freedom. We are not going to be responsible for our wives as long as we are able to discharge the responsibilities of telling what righteousness is to the best of our ability. Now, if a wife chooses some other path, whatever path she has, she is responsible for her own actions towards God. So what we do is we take responsibility not only of our children, but of our spouse as well. And I think this is high time that we should just back away from that and think about our own selves.
I have a question here.
Thank you.
So the question I have that we have been talking about the relation between kids and the parents, and there's a lot of expectations the kids have from the parents, and parents do have the same. So my suggestion is, as a parent, we should think and be a role model. If you're not praying 5 times a day, how can you think your kids can pray?
Right.
We expect more, but we are not expecting much from the kids because they are not delivering.
So you're correct. What you're expecting is something that you're not doing yourself.
Yes.
So if you want something to happen to your children, you have to be the best representative of that.
Yeah.
If you want your child to be a truthful person, if you want him to be a practicing person, you have to be practicing yourself. You have to be truthful yourself. Otherwise, he will see an immediate conflict. I just last night, or a day before, one of my friends related a very interesting episode, and he said that he was about to, he was just putting on his coat when he got a call from his company, and he said that please come to your office immediately because we want you. And his 4-year-old son was listening to that conversation. And my friend, he said, well, I'm in the car and I'm going someplace else, and I would not be able to come to the place, to the office. And that 4-year-old son said, once he put on the phone, that Baba, you were not in the car, you were about to get into the car. So why did you say that you were in the car? So you can see that a 4-year-old is actually stopping his or her parent to do something which actually he is doing. Although he was stepping into the car, he told me that he was about to enter the car and put on the ignition. But the fact is that he had not yet started the car. And what he did was, he said that I'm in the car and traveling. So something which he had intended to do was already conveyed as if he had done that. So I think you're absolutely right that youngsters, they copy from their children and they have their own self of correction as well. This is something which is ingrained in this Western society. When you grow up here, you immediately find a person or a boy or a girl at a very young age, because of the traditions that they see all around them, that he or she is immediately geared towards right and wrong. And if you want your child to become a truthful and righteous and a pious person, you have to be that yourself.
It's a very rightful answer, because in our home we carry cultural taboos. Our home culture is different from the one people see in the real world. And Canada is very open, it's very liberal, and it's very straightforward. So kids don't see what they see at home is different from the one they experience.
Right.
So it has to be a balance.
It has to be something as your own self, you have to come forward.
Yes.
An extension to the question around divorce. We talked about the.
Could you speak a little louder?
Yeah, as an extension to the question about divorce. About divorce.
Divorce.
Yeah. As a man or as a single son, what are your responsibilities towards your parents? And what happens?
Single son. What does that mean? You're the only son.
The only son.
You are the only son.
Yeah.
And one of your parents get divorced?
No. As
Okay.
a man, you're married.
Okay.
What are your responsibilities
Towards your parents.
Right. For them, you're the only
Okay.
son. While your spouse tries to affect that relationship.
Okay. So if your parents are dependent upon you, you see, parents are of various sorts. At times they're independent, they live independently, they're earning themselves, they are financially well settled. Of course, then the responsibility is more on that emotional part in which you meet them, you pamper them, etc. But if they are dependent upon you, and because of their age or because of financial reasons, then it is the responsibility of the children, of the child, to look after the parents. And if he creates some balance in this responsibility and he creates time to spouses herself also, I think that no wife is such a hard-hearted lady that she would object to that. What happens is that a husband tilts himself so much to one side that the wife thinks that she's being infringed upon, her rights are being infringed upon. So it's a difficult thing when your parents are living together, when you're living with them, to strike a balance between your spouse and and your parents. But as I said, this is the real trial that we are actually facing today, or we need to come out of it, and that is that do what best we can for the spouses, but not tilt ourselves to one side. And the key word is balance. So the more we are balanced in our attitude, the more better a chance that such a situation would not arise.
Thank you, Dr. Sam. I have two questions that were received to me, and they're both quite similar, so I'm going to ask both of them the same question. So the first one is, the usage of many intoxicants has become widespread amongst many young adult teens. What are your thoughts on this, and how should they go on about this struggle? And also, the next question is, why is intoxication harmful?
You see, as far as the first part is concerned, intoxication is something, of course, which is much more accessible, and you're always using it. And I'll address the second part first. You see, intoxication makes you lose your senses. It makes you a person who loses his or her intellect. He or she does not take responsibility in life. So intoxication is often the result of extreme moods that you might have. You might be very sad, you might be extremely happy. So intoxication actually paralyzes your intellectual abilities. And one of the hallmarks of a human being is that her or his intellectual ability must always be vibrant and living. He or she must take decisions in a way that that intellect is always there and the final means of decision making. But when you take intoxicants, you find yourself becoming lazy, you find yourself becoming grumpy. I mean, I don't need to count these bad effects of intoxication. And because of the fact that the world is actually unanimous in the fact that these intoxicants they play havoc with us. The extreme form is that a person becomes such a big addict to a certain thing that for him or her life, it becomes a life-saving thing. And instead of stopping that person, you have to supply that thing to that person, because that's how he's going to survive. And look at such people, how they fare in life. They cannot contribute in life. They become a burden to society. They become something which their parents really worry about a lot. So I think there is a lot that can be said regarding the negativities of intoxicants. And I'm sorry, what was the first part?
What if you're medically prescribed an intoxicant to treat a bigger problem?
So, for example, morphine is an intoxicant, and you know that in extreme cancer situations, to avoid pain, it is administered. So that would be something which is pretty okay. But you see, lesser than that, in which there are intoxicants which are used as medicines, I would say if the alternative exists, and with the best of my knowledge, there are many alternatives to intoxicants. So unless there is no alternative, I think they should be avoided. Unless, as I said, the situation is of extreme, like morphine is a big intoxicant, and it has to be used for cancer patients who are terminally sick.
To repeat the first part, it was, what are your thoughts on the usage of many intoxicants, the widespread of it, and how should people with this struggle go about it?
So my thoughts are the same as your thoughts. I mean, this is something which all of us agree, and no one would say that intoxicating ourselves is something of a good nature. So, I mean, you take tea, you take coffee, they're also intoxicants in a very small sense. But if you go along with these words, intoxicants, of course, they refer to extreme agents which cause disruption in our body, in our mind, faculties. And this is like showing, of course, distrust in the faculties which God has given us as well. So we end up misusing them as well. So I don't think that I need to elaborate much more on that, because as far as intoxication is concerned, this is something which all of us would not like any of our children or ourselves to get engaged with, and then ultimately end up as people who are addicts.
The next question, I think it's a follow-up on the Messiah question. It says there's a show, and in that show it says that no one has gone to heaven for many years, but how can people be judged on things when the people around them don't tell them it's wrong, since society is so accepting of everything now?
You see, we have to realize that as far as heaven or hell are concerned, we will be consigned to heaven or hell once we go to the hereafter. I mean, today no one is in heaven or hell. They are yet to see any person, any human being, because we have been told in the Quran that once accountability is going to take place, once you're going to be told whether you have a plus account or a minus account, how can heaven or hell accept someone? So I think that whether it's the Messiah who is responsible for that, or whether it's your own self, that's another debate, which we not going to. But the fact is that this is going to happen once we are judged on the basis of our deeds in the hereafter. And we know from the Quran, and several verses which tell us that this balance of justice will be set up in the hereafter. People will be asked about their deeds. Our own limbs will testify about our deeds, and then ultimately the balance sheet will be created, and the final decision will be taken then. So that's how I think.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question says, given that you said all the Islamic principles are grounded in reason, given that you said that all Islamic principles are grounded in reason, why is homosexuality disallowed in Islam if those affected by it have no control over their sexual orientation?
So as far as homosexuality is concerned, you see, whether it's genetically compelled or whether you're going to have any control over it, it's an aberration, it's a deviation. For example, if a person, just to give you an extreme example, if he's a compulsive liar or a compulsive kleptomaniac or a compulsive necrophiliac, all these things are deviations, and if they do something which is against their own desire, they would be stopping themselves or maybe blaming God for that. So in all these situations, what we can gauge from is that God is the ultimate judge of all such people. If they do something out of compulsion which they have no control of, and in spite of exercising all their control, they end up in something bad, maybe they get some mitigation from God, maybe some concession from God. But as far as it being a bad thing is concerned, we know it from the Quran very well. We know that when Adam and Eve were created as a family, there were no two Adams, there were no two Eves. A family came into being through sexual contact between a male and a female gender, which means that God's preference in a family life is that it has to be a male and a female coming along. And also we know from the story of the Prophet Lot that this is something which is suggestible in the eyes of the Almighty as well. Having said that, I do think that people who have these homosexual tendencies, my own personal view is that we must not look down upon them, we must not ostracize them, we must not think that we are superior to them. We must leave their matter to God. Every person has his own intention with God. Every person could be a righteous individual. At times he's struggling and you don't know the struggle that is going on in a person's heart. So we must not judge people who have a different sexual orientation, whether they are homosexuals or not. We have to be on guard what we are ourselves. So on the one hand, we might not agree with the sexual orientation of a homosexual, but on the other hand, we have to be compassionate. We have to be a person who does not look down upon another person who has this orientation. We must not, as I said, cut them off from our society or from our own family, maybe, because we have instances in which our own family members at times are involved in this activity. So I think that while on the one hand maybe differing ideologically and thinking that this is something which is not proper, on the other hand we have to realize that they are human beings, and as human beings they can have many other qualities and do have. I have seen people who have this tendency, pray 5 times a day, fast, go for Hajj, and do many good things. So let God be the judge, ultimate judge of this, and let us not judge other people, and if we have to judge anyone, let it be ourselves.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up here. It is 3:45 now, so we're gonna conclude the questions here. So there are 10 minutes left. We're gonna call Dr. or Mr. Sean Sheikh to the stage, and then after that we'll follow up with pictures.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I just want to say a few words in closing about future opportunities for you to engage with Al-Mawrid, Al-Mawrid scholars in our office here in Mississauga. Of course, this was just a short session, and for some of you, this might be the first time you've heard of Al-Mawrid or of Dr. Shehzad. And there'll be many more opportunities for you to reach out. Of course, we can't address all questions in one setting, and we've only sort of scratched the surface. But one thing we hope that you leave with today's session is that you've gotten a taste of the sort of environment that Al-Mawrid is trying to build, that we're trying to build a culture of openness, a place where people can come with whatever questions that are troubling them and ask without having any sense of fear, where the scholarly community is engaging you with a sense of understanding and empathy. Indeed, even when the angels questioned God about placing a khilafah on the earth, God did not respond with condemning them. So this is the sort of environment that we want to create. Some of you may still have been uncomfortable to ask some questions that are on your mind or are troubling you. And some of you may not be fully satisfied with the answers that you received today. That's fine. We encourage you to reach out to us. You can, we have our brochures and we have our website, al-mawridinstitute.ca. You can come visit us or call us. And if there's more that we can do to help you deal with the challenges that Muslims are facing today, and there are immense challenges with respect to extremism within our midst, or whether it's an onslaught of secular ideologies that have a magnifying glass on what Muslims believe and what they're doing, it's clear that we're in immense pressure. And basically, in this, we need to come together. We need to revisit our scholarly approach to understanding Islam and be able to come back to the sacred sources of the Quran and the Sunnah with a fresh perspective and not necessarily in deference to the scholars of the past with respect to dealing with our issues of the present. And this is, Al-Mawrid is an important voice in this ongoing conversation. So I'd like to encourage you to stay in touch. We should have more events. Stay tuned, inshallah.
Dr. Saleem, this is a token of our appreciation on behalf of Al-Mawrid, and everybody feel free to come down. If you have some good pictures, just make sure to form the line and everybody can get an opportunity one by one.
We'd also like to mention that this is the opportunity to get your books autographed if that's what you're into. While Dr. Shehzad's here, you might as well take advantage of that opportunity.
If everybody could just come from the left side and form a queue.
No, I swear I tried my level best every single time. But you know what? I haven't played it a lot.